Hey guys, welcome back to this channel, The Voice of the Past. In this video, we will unfold the untold story of the Kensington family's phantom inheritance, Money from the Beyond. Before continuing, if you are new into this channel, please consider subscribing to this channel. Let's start. The Kensington estate had always stood like a silent sentinel against time, an imposing structure of gray stone, adorned with intricate carvings, its gargoyles staring down from the edges of the roof like watchful sentinels. Surrounded by acres of unkempt gardens and dense woodlands, it had been the pride of the Kensington lineage for over 2 centuries. Once, it had been a house of grandeur, filled with laughter, music, and opulent gatherings of England's elite. Now it was a relic of a forgotten era, a fading echo of its former splendor. Eleanor Kensington, the last of her bloodline, had spent the past decade living alone within its cold, hollow walls. Time had not been kind to her family, and the estate was falling into disrepair. The fortune that had once sustained it long since dissipated into the unknown. A vast collection of antique furniture, covered in white sheets, filled the great halls like ghosts of the past. Paintings of long-dead ancestors stared down at her, their expressions solemn, their eyes hollow and watchful. She had long accepted her fate. She was the last of the Kensingtons, and with her, the name would fade into history. But on the morning of her 32nd birthday, everything changed. A letter arrived. It had no postage, no return address. The envelope, yellowed with age yet oddly untouched by dust, bore the Kensington family crest, a golden lion encircled by an elaborate wreath. The moment she held it in her hands, a strange chill passed over her, as though the house itself had exhaled after years of silence. With hesitant fingers, she broke the seal and unfolded the parchment inside. The handwriting was pristine, its cursive strokes eerily familiar. My dearest heir, if you are reading this, the time has come. The Kensington fortune has never truly vanished, though its presence has remained hidden from the world. Follow the path set before you, and you will uncover what is rightfully yours. But be warned, the price of wealth is never light, and what is given can just as easily be taken away. Begin where the family fell. Follow the shadows, and you shall find the light. The signature at the bottom sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. Arthur Kensington, her great-grandfather, a man who had been missing for nearly a century. Eleanor stared at the paper, her heart thundering in her chest. How was this possible? Arthur Kensington had disappeared in 1927 under circumstances that had never been fully explained. The official story was that he had left for a business venture and never returned, but family rumors suggested something more sinister: a lost fortune, occult dealings, and a secret that had damned the family to ruin. And yet, here was his letter, seemingly untouched by time. She read the words again. Begin where the family fell. A flood of memories rushed through her mind. The Kensington family had not just declined, they had fallen. Arthur's disappearance had marked the beginning of a string of tragedies. Soon after, his eldest son, Richard, had lost the family's shipping empire to a scandal that had tarnished their name. A series of mysterious deaths followed, each heir meeting an untimely end. By the time Eleanor was born, the estate was all that remained, and even that was crumbling. Could it be possible that Arthur had left something behind? A secret inheritance? Eleanor clenched the letter tightly, her mind spinning with questions. She needed answers. But where had the family fallen? What shadows was she supposed to follow? Then it struck her. There was one place no one had dared enter since Arthur's disappearance: the Forbidden Wing. The east wing of the mansion had been sealed off for decades. After Arthur's vanishing, the family had locked it up, and with each passing generation, it had remained untouched. dust-covered furniture, decayed paintings, and an eerie sense of foreboding awaited behind its heavy oak doors. Eleanor exhaled, steeling herself. If there was a truth to be uncovered, it began there. With the letter still clutched in her hand, she made her way through the dimly lit halls of the mansion. The air grew heavier as she approached the east wing's entrance, a grand set of double doors covered in dust and cobwebs. She hesitated for only a moment before placing her hands on the cold brass handles and pushing them open. The doors groaned in protest as they swung inward, revealing a vast, dark corridor beyond. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of old books, forgotten secrets, and something else, something that made her skin prickle. As Eleanor stepped inside, she had the distinct sensation that she was not alone. Somewhere in the darkness, something was waiting. The air in the east wing was thick with the scent of time, dust, damp wood, and the faint lingering aroma of something old and unspoken. As Eleanor stepped forward, the floorboards groaned under her weight, the sound swallowed by the suffocating silence of a place long untouched. She had never been allowed in this part of the house. Her father had warned her since childhood. The east wing is closed for a reason. Do not disturb what should remain undisturbed. But now, with the cryptic letter burning in her hands, she knew she had no choice. She pulled a brass oil lamp from the corridor wall, striking a match to light it. A dim, flickering glow illuminated the abandoned hallway, revealing intricate tapestries, their colors faded by time. The light cast long, quivering shadows against the walls, making it feel as though unseen figures watched her every move. At the far end of the corridor, a heavy wooden door stood waiting, adorned with a tarnished brass plaque. The inscription was barely legible, but she traced the letters with her fingers and whispered aloud, "Arthur Kensington's study." Her breath hitched. If Arthur had hidden something, his fortune, his secrets, it had to be in there. With a deep breath, she turned the handle. It resisted at first, the weight of years pressing against it. But after a firm push, the door groaned open, revealing a vast, dimly lit chamber. Inside, everything remained eerily preserved. Shelves lined with books of forgotten knowledge stretched from floor to ceiling, their leather bindings cracked with age. A grand oak desk stood at the center, covered in scattered papers, as if Arthur himself had just stepped away for a moment and never returned. Eleanor ran her fingers across the desk's surface, brushing away dust and revealing faded ink on an open ledger. The numbers and calculations meant nothing to her, but one name scrawled at the bottom sent a chill down her spine. Eleanor. Her own name. Heart pounding, she turned the page. More writing, more notes, written decades before she was even born. The words were hurried, panicked. The shadows are growing. They watch. They know. But I cannot stop now. I have secured the inheritance beyond their reach. If one of my own finds this, they must seek the mirror. The mirror sees what the eyes cannot. Eleanor turned toward the far corner of the room, where a large antique mirror stood against the wall. Its surface was dusty, its once gilded frame dulled with time. Something about it made her uneasy. The mirror sees what the eyes cannot. Slowly, hesitantly, she stepped toward it. She wiped the dust away with the sleeve of her sweater, revealing her own reflection, pale, tense, and framed by the dim glow of the oil lamp. But as she studied the mirror more closely, something changed. Her reflection shifted. The room in the mirror was not the same as the one she stood in. The bookshelves were bare, the walls lined with deep, jagged scratches, as though someone or something had clawed at them. And behind her reflection, a shadow flickered. She spun around. Nothing. Eleanor's breath came in short gasps. She turned back to the mirror, her hands trembling. The shadow in the reflection was still there, but now it had eyes, dark, hollow voids, staring directly at her. And then, in the reflection, a drawer in the desk slid open, but in the real room nothing had moved. Eleanor hesitated. Then, moving with equal parts terror and determination, she reached down and pulled open the same drawer in the real desk. Inside was a single object, a small black iron key. She exhaled sharply, glancing back at the mirror. The shadow was gone. The scratches on the walls in the reflection had disappeared. The room had returned to normal. Eleanor clutched the key tightly in her palm. Arthur had left her a message. This was not just a game. This was real. The Kensington fortune, whatever it was, had been hidden for a reason, and the key in her hand was the first step in unlocking the truth. But as she turned to leave, the room suddenly felt colder. The oil lamp flickered violently, the flame nearly extinguishing. Somewhere, just beyond her line of sight, she heard it. A whisper. "You shouldn't have come." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. The whisper had been unmistakable, soft yet chilling, carried by the still air of the forgotten study. She held the iron key tightly, its cold surface digging into her palm, grounding her in reality. She forced herself to turn around, scanning the dimly lit room. Nothing. No movement. No sign of another presence. And yet, the feeling of being watched had only grown stronger. With quickened steps, she left the study, pulling the heavy wooden door shut behind her. As she stepped back into the main corridor of the East Wing, the air seemed to shift, as though something had retreated into the shadows. The key in her hand. That was her next clue. She hurried back to her own room, the safest place she knew in the crumbling estate. It was smaller than the grand chambers her ancestors had once occupied, but it was hers. A sanctuary in an otherwise haunted mansion. Eleanor placed the key on her desk and pulled Arthur's letter from her pocket. She read the words again. "Begin where the family fell. Follow the shadows, and you shall find the light." And then his note from the study. "I have secured the inheritance beyond their reach." Her mind raced. Where had the family fallen? What had Arthur meant by shadows? The Kensington downfall had begun with Arthur's disappearance. The rumors, the scandals, the misfortunes, they had all followed after he vanished. If he had hidden something, it had to be in a place connected to that event. And then it struck her. The East Wing Ballroom. It was the last place Arthur had been seen before his disappearance. A grand space once meant for extravagant parties, now left to dust and silence. It was said that the night before he vanished, he had been seen pacing across the ballroom floor speaking to someone, or something, that no one else could see. That had to be it. Eleanor grabbed the iron key and made her way downstairs. The mansion groaned around her as she moved, as though it sensed her purpose. As she neared the ballroom doors, she hesitated. The air here was different, thicker. The chandeliers above, coated in cobwebs, dangled like forgotten relics of a grander past. She reached for the ballroom doors and pushed them open. The vast room stretched before her, its once golden walls dulled with time. The ceiling fresco, depicting gods and angels in a celestial dance, had faded into near obscurity. The grand piano in the corner stood untouched, its ivory keys hidden beneath a thick sheet of dust. But Eleanor wasn't interested in the walls or the piano. She was looking at the floor. She held the iron key tighter, stepping cautiously into the center of the ballroom. The wooden panels beneath her feet groaned, some looser than others. Arthur had secured something. He had hidden something. Her gaze swept across the room, searching. And then she saw it, a faint marking on the floor, barely visible beneath layers of dust. She knelt and brushed the dust away, revealing an intricate carving in the wood. A symbol. A lion's head. The Kensington family crest. Her heart pounded. She reached into her pocket, pulling out the iron key. It was small, far too small for a door, but as she studied the carving, she noticed something, a nearly invisible keyhole embedded in the wooden floor, right beneath the lion's head. Eleanor's hands trembled as she inserted the key and turned. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, click. The floor beneath her shifted. A hollow sound echoed beneath the ballroom as a hidden compartment slid open. Dust billowed into the air as Eleanor scrambled backward. When the dust cleared, she saw it. A small iron chest nestled within the hidden space beneath the ballroom floor. This was it. Arthur's secret. The Kensington inheritance. She reached out, fingers trembling, and lifted the chest from its hiding place. It was heavier than she expected. The lock had rusted with age, but with one firm tug, it broke open. Eleanor exhaled and lifted the lid. Inside, beneath layers of velvet cloth, lay a collection of old documents, a leather-bound journal, and a stack of banknotes so ancient they barely seemed real. She picked up the journal first, its cover embossed with the initials AK, Arthur Kensington. She flipped open the first page, the ink faded but legible. To my heir, whomever you may be, if you have found this, then you are the last of the Kensington line, and I pray you are wise enough to heed my words. The fortune you seek is not merely gold or paper. It is something far greater and far more dangerous. I was not the first to discover its power, nor shall you be the last. But know this. What I have taken, others will come for. The shadows are watching. They always have been. Eleanor felt a cold shiver crawl down her spine. She turned the page, but before she could read further, a loud bang echoed through the mansion. The ballroom doors slammed shut. And then, footsteps, approaching. She was no longer alone. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, echoing through the vast ballroom like a warning. Eleanor's grip on the leather-bound journal tightened, her pulse hammering in her ears. She turned toward the ballroom doors, expecting to see someone, anyone standing there. But the space remained empty. Yet the sound of footsteps continued, coming closer. A sharp chill prickled her skin, the kind that whispered of unseen eyes in the dark. Every instinct told her to run, but something held her in place, an unshakable sense that if she turned her back now, she would regret it. And then, she heard it again. A whisper. But this time, it was different. It was closer. "You should not have come," Eleanor gasped, her breath hitching. She took a step backward, nearly stumbling over the hidden compartment in the floor. Something moved in the dim light, a flicker of darkness shifting in the farthest corner of the ballroom. At first, she thought it was a trick of the flickering chandeliers, but no, it was real. A shadow. No, not a shadow. A figure. Tall, unmoving, watching. Eleanor clenched her jaw, forcing herself to stay steady. She had spent years in this house, in its silent halls, surrounded by its ghosts. Fear had been her companion for as long as she could remember. But this was something else. She tightened her grip on the journal and spoke, her voice steadier than she felt. "Who are you?" The figure did not answer, but the air around her grew colder. The flames of the chandeliers trembled, their glow shrinking as if something unseen was leaching the warmth from the room. And then, it moved. Not with steps, not with any natural motion. It glided, shifting across the ballroom floor without a sound, closing the distance between them too quickly. Eleanor stumbled back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She clutched the journal to her chest, her mind racing. This had to be connected to Arthur's warning. The shadows are watching. They always have been. Had Arthur known this would happen? Had he hidden his fortune not just from the world but from something else? The figure stopped just short of her, its presence towering. Up close, it was featureless, an empty void in the shape of a man. Yet, in place of a face, two hollow, burning eyes stared at her, and then it spoke again. Leave it. Its voice was layered, a chorus of whispers woven together into something unnatural. The sound crawled under her skin, spreading ice through her veins. It didn't want her. It wanted the journal. Eleanor's grip tightened. She had made it this far. She wasn't about to surrender the only clue she had. Gathering every ounce of courage, she whispered, "No." For a moment, there was silence. Then, the chandelier above her shattered. Glass and metal rained down, and Eleanor threw herself to the floor, shielding her head as shards clattered around her. The wind roared through the ballroom, as if the house itself was protesting her defiance. When she looked up, the figure was still there. Closer now. She had seconds to act. Without thinking, Eleanor grabbed the stack of banknotes from the iron chest and hurled them toward the figure. The brittle old bills scattered through the air like dying leaves. The shadow did not react to the money. But in that moment of distraction, Eleanor ran. She sprinted across the ballroom, shoving past the broken chandelier debris and throwing herself toward the heavy wooden doors. The instant her hands touched them, she felt resistance, as though something unseen was holding them shut. No, no, no. With all her strength, she wrenched them open and stumbled into the main hall. The ballroom doors slammed shut behind her. Silence. The chill faded. The house returned to stillness, as though nothing had happened. Eleanor leaned against the door, gasping for breath, her hands trembling. The journal was still clutched tightly in her grasp. She had made it out. But whatever had been in that room, whatever had watched her, spoken to her, it was still inside, and it wasn't going to let her go so easily. The hidden message. Back in her room, Eleanor wasted no time. She needed answers, now. She sat at her desk, flipping through Arthur's journal. The pages were filled with notes, sketches, and cryptic messages written in a frantic hand. One entry stood out. The inheritance is not just money. It is knowledge, a secret passed down through the generations. It is power, power that does not belong to man alone. Eleanor's fingers traced the ink. Another passage, written in bold letters. It is not a fortune. It is a burden. Her pulse quickened. Then, a name. Marionette House. The last key is there. Eleanor's breath hitched. She knew that name. Marionette House was an old, abandoned estate on the edge of town, once owned by a secretive branch of the Kensington family. No one lived there anymore. No one dared. She turned to the final page, and there, in Arthur's scrawled handwriting, was one last warning. If you take it, you must protect it. If you protect it, you will never be free. And if you fail, they will come for you. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the journal. She had two choices: forget everything and walk away, or follow the path Arthur had left behind, straight into the darkness. She already knew what she was going to do. Eleanor stood at the gates of Marionette House, the moon casting eerie shadows across its crumbling facade. The mansion had been abandoned for decades, swallowed by ivy and time. Arthur's journal had led her here, but something in her gut told her this was more than just a place. It was a threshold, a final test. The rusted gate creaked as she pushed it open, the sound echoing through the still night. The house loomed before her, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring down. She stepped inside. Dust and decay filled the air, the floorboards groaning beneath her weight. The interior was a ruin of forgotten grandeur, faded wallpaper, shattered chandeliers, and long corridors that stretched into darkness. The journal had mentioned the last key. If Arthur's words were true, the final secret, the real inheritance, was hidden here. Moving cautiously, Eleanor followed the markings in the journal, guiding her toward a fireplace in the grand hall. The Kensington crest was carved into the stone, just like in the ballroom. She ran her hands over the surface until, click, a hidden compartment slid open, revealing a small silver box. Heart pounding, she lifted the lid. Inside was a second key, unlike the first. This one was intricately designed, its metal swirling with strange patterns. Arthur's final note echoed in her mind. The last key is there. But before she could react, the shadows moved. A sudden chilling presence filled the room, the air growing thick and suffocating. She wasn't alone. Eleanor turned, and they were there. Figures, dozens of them, standing at the edges of the room, their bodies swallowed in darkness, their hollow eyes locked onto her. The guardians of the secret. A single voice whispered, "You cannot take it." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the key. But she had come too far to turn back now. With one last breath, she ran, straight into the unknown. Eleanor ran. The whispers grew louder, hissing in her ears, their voices layered and inhuman. The shadows moved along the walls, reaching for her, stretching like grasping hands. But she didn't stop. Clutching the final key, she bolted through the decayed halls of Marionette House, her only thought, get out. Get out now. She burst through the front door, gasping as she stumbled into the cold night air. The mansion behind her seemed to breathe, its structure shifting, its windows pulsing like unseen eyes. But the shadows did not follow, not yet. She didn't have time to question why. She had the key, and she knew where it belonged. The vault beneath Kensington Estate. Back at Kensington Manor, the house felt different. The air was heavier, the silence watchful. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She rushed toward the ballroom where she had first uncovered Arthur's hidden compartment. The silver key in her hand hummed with an energy she didn't understand. The moment she approached the old lion crest on the ballroom floor, a second keyhole revealed itself, one she hadn't seen before. With shaking fingers, she inserted the silver key. Click. The floor shifted. Then it opened. A staircase spiraled downward into darkness. Eleanor hesitated, her heart hammering. Then, gripping her lantern, she descended. The true inheritance. At the bottom of the stairs lay a hidden chamber, a vast underground vault that no one had seen in over a century. The walls were lined with gold bars, ancient documents, and jewels, proof of the Kensington family's long-lost fortune. But Eleanor barely noticed. At the center of the vault stood an altar, and upon it, a black tome. Bound in aged leather, its pages pulsed with a faint, eerie glow. Inscribed on its cover in golden letters, "The Kensington Legacy." Arthur's final warning echoed in her mind. The inheritance is not just money. It is power, and power always comes with a price. Eleanor approached the book slowly. She could feel the energy radiating from it, something ancient, something alive. She opened it. The pages were filled with secrets, the true reason behind the Kensington wealth. Deals made with forces beyond this world, contracts written in ink not entirely human. A final passage was scrawled at the bottom. We bargained with shadows. We paid the cost. And now, the last heir must decide, will the Kensington name rise again, or will you let the past be buried? Eleanor stared at the words, her hands shaking. The phantom inheritance was more than money. It was a legacy tied to darkness. If she accepted it, she would be rich beyond imagination, but she would never be free. The shadows would never stop watching. If she destroyed it, she would end the cycle. The Kensington name would fade into history. The wealth, the power, it would all be lost. The vault trembled around her. The whispers returned, calling her name. She had to choose. Eleanor took a breath. And then she made her decision. Epilogue. The fate of the Kensington name. No one ever saw Eleanor Kensington again. Some say she took the inheritance and disappeared into obscurity, living a life of wealth in the shadows. Others believe she destroyed it, vanishing to escape the curse that had haunted her family for generations. But one thing remained true. Kensington Manor was never the same. Some nights, passers-by claim they hear whispers from the estate. Faint flickers of light appear in its windows, long after it was abandoned. And in the ballroom, beneath the old chandelier, a single key still rests on the floor, waiting for the next heir. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more stories like this, hit that like button and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And let me know on which topic you would like to see stories next. And check out these other stories you might enjoy. See you in the next one. Till then, take care and goodbye.